Okay, let's unpack this. 32 and a half hours. That's how long Judy and Matt's journey from Seattle to Honduras took. Just think about that for a second.
Yeah, that's a serious amount of travel time.
And then their luggage goes missing. And the story they get, supposedly held for ransom by, well, involves Afghan rebels, a missile, and peanut butter sandwiches. It sounds completely unbelievable, right?
It really does. And what's interesting is how that experience, just getting there, throws us right into one of the main themes we're exploring today.
Yeah.
The sheer unpredictability of these short-term mission trips.
Exactly.
For this deep dive, we're looking at some firsthand accounts. We've got diary entries from someone working at a clinic down in Honduras, really detailing the day-to-day, the arrival of different teams. And then we also have some broader reflections, thinking about the planning, the culture shock, all the stuff that goes into it.
Right. So what we're aiming for today is to, well, get beyond maybe the glossy brochure version of short-term missions. We want to really understand what the experience feels like on the ground. Forget any, idealized pictures. We're diving into the real stuff, the logistical nightmares sometimes, the cultural learning curves, those unexpected human moments that always seem to pop up.
Yeah, the grit and the grace. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. We're hoping to offer you, the listener, a clear picture, maybe some real aha moments based on these experiences.
And the sources, they really give us a lot to work with. The diary entries are so immediate, you feel like you're right there. The medical work, dealing with local folks. There's even this incredibly tense story about a near-fatal heart attack.
Wow.
And then the other pieces give us that step-back perspective, looking at preparation, what happens when cultures clash, even just slightly.
Okay, let's start with that journey itself, because 32 and a half hours, Seattle to Denver, then Vegas, New Orleans, finally Honduras. I mean, that's an ordeal before you even start the work.
It really is. It makes you think about the state people arrive in. How effective can you be when you're just shattered from travel?
Good point. And then the luggage fiasco. That explanation from the Taka agent. Independent, pro-Mujahideen rebel terrorists in Afghanistan. Conspiring with pilots. Wanting peanut butter sandwiches.
It's almost comical, but imagine being Judy and Matt, hearing that after that marathon trip. Utterly frustrating.
Totally. And maybe, like you said, an early sign of how communication or maybe just problem solving can work differently in different places. Or maybe just a really bizarre one-off story.
Could be either, really, but it sets a certain tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The unexpected is right there from minute one.
And you'd think, okay, horrible journey, lost luggage, maybe a day to recover.
You would hope so.
Nope. The very next day, diary says, 8 a.m., start at the clinic after getting up super early. And the heat. 92 degrees inside, 100 outside.
Well, no gentle easing in there.
Not at all. It's immediate immersion, straight into the thick of it.
And that immediate plunge, that's something you hear about a lot. Teams might plan for some adjustment time, but the reality on the ground is often that the needs are urgent. The clinic, as the diary shows, was busy right away. Critical stuff often came later in the day.
And even the practical things, like the diary mentions they're still setting up a diagnostic lab. That's not just plug and play, is it? Establishing infrastructure in a completely new environment takes time and effort.
Absolutely. And it highlights that need for resourcefulness, for adapting, like that story about the plane doing a low pass to check the runway.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, they were planning a landing approach, north-south, seemed logical on paper. But when the plane actually flew it low, they realized it would put them dangerously close to the clinic building.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they had to completely rethink the approach based on that on-the-ground reality check, and something you just couldn't see from afar. It really underscores needing local input and actual eyes on the situation.
Good thing they checked. So what happened with the infamous luggage?
Yes. It did show up eventually, a few days later. And the ransom demands apparently went through this whole bizarre evolution.
Right, from millions and a firstborn.
To a missile and peanut butter sandwiches.
And the final price.
Apparently, it settled on just a Snickers bar and some old luggage tags the agent wanted.
Can't make this stuff up. It's kind of funny in hindsight, I guess. Shows how problems can sometimes just resolve in weird ways.
It does. A bit of absurdity amidst the challenges. But the diary also gets into some deeper shifts, personal perspectives changing.
Like the knee injury.
Exactly. The writer mentions feeling a bit sorry for themselves over a twisted knee. Kind of a poor knee moment.
We've all been there.
Right. But then almost immediately, a patient comes in with a severely swollen knee, clearly in a lot more pain, and instantly that self-pity just evaporates.
Talk about a reality check. Puts your own stuff in perspective real fast.
It really does. And there's another bit. about catching a cold. Suddenly, they're experiencing the same symptoms as many of their patients, and it creates this whole new level of empathy.
Yeah, you move from sympathizing to actually feeling it, even a little bit. That must change how you relate to people.
For sure. It goes from abstract knowledge to something really personal, visceral. But, it's important to say that diary isn't all hardship. There are these beautiful moments woven in, too.
Like what?
Well, there's this entry described almost like a warning.
Right.
Warning. The following entry contains scenes of a lovely meal.
Ha!
Bob Fitts music playing, a stunning sunset over the Caribbean Sea, watching a little foal interacting gently with a dog.
Oh, that's lovely. Those little snapshots are important, aren't they? They remind you it's not all struggle and difficulty. There's beauty and peace to be found, too.
Absolutely. It paints a much fuller picture. But then you also get these encounters that are, well, more complex, like the young boy at the gate.
What was his story?
He claimed he was an orphan looking for help. But then later, someone saw him riding a doot bike.
Okay. So maybe not quite the full picture.
Possibly. It raises questions about discernment, How do you assess needs accurately?
Right.
And the diary highlights how crucial the local pastors at the clinic were for providing that kind of guidance, for counseling, for helping figure out these situations.
That makes sense. You need that local wisdom. Things aren't always straightforward. And then there were the infrastructure issues. Power outage, water problems all at once.
Yep. Just boom, everything goes out. It really underscores how basic utilities we take for granted can be unpredictable elsewhere.
And you just have to cope, figure it out.
Pretty much. The diary mentions someone saying, almost casually, oh, it's happened before, which tells you something about the norm.
Right. But the most dramatic event you mentioned was the heart attack, the Olympic record treatment.
Yes, that was intense. They didn't have the usual clot-busting drugs like streptokinase or TPA, very limited equipment.
So what did they do?
The response was basically aspirin, some strong Tylenol, #4-lidocaine, which can help with heart rhythms, and a lot of prayer.
Wow. That's a world away from a typical ER response here.
Absolutely. A stark contrast. It relied on the absolute basics, community support, and faith. And the remarkable thing is apparently the patient did well. They recovered.
That's incredible. It really challenges assumptions about what's possible, even with limited resources. Aspirin, of course, helps with clotting, like lidocaine for rhythm, but still.
It's a powerful story. And it leads us nicely into the more reflective parts of our sources, looking beyond the day-to-day diary entries.
Right, the preparation, the culture shock, the bigger lessons learned from mission trips in general.
Exactly. And that anecdote about Becky and the geckos in the Philippines, that's a perfect example of a key point.
What happened there?
Well, Becky had apparently been through all the pre-trip training, knew what to expect intellectually. But when she actually encountered geckos everywhere in her room, she just couldn't handle it, freaked out.
So knowing something isn't the same as experiencing it.
Precisely. No amount of briefing can fully prepare you for your own individual, visceral reaction to something totally new or, maybe a bit creepy crawly depending on your perspective.
It shows you really need that direct experience, which ties into the idea of a team leader doing a scouting visit beforehand, right? The source really emphasizes that.
Oh, hugely. Going there first, seeing the actual needs, the logistics, the living conditions.
Yeah.
The source argues it can be the difference between a trip being helpful or being, and I quote, an abysmal failure, if not dangerous.
Strong words. What kind of failures are we talking about?
Well, the examples given are pretty stark, like taking a construction team without checking if the right tools or materials are available locally, or bringing electrical equipment that uses the wrong voltage.
Oh, man. Yeah, that wouldn't be helpful. It would just create more problems.
Exactly. It's about making sure your effort actually fits the need and the context. And alongside that practical prep, there's a big emphasis on spiritual preparation, too. Prayer support from the home church.
How do they emphasize that?
The source mentions discerning carefully who feels genuinely called to go. And this idea of using wristbands as a physical reminder for the team members that people back home are praying for them.
That's a nice touch, a tangible connection.
Yeah, and apparently it also served as a conversation started back home, a way to witness about their experience.
Yeah.
But beyond the spiritual, there's the nitty-gritty. Travel plans, fundraising.
Always a big part of it.
Right. And the advice is clear. Get the whole church involved early. Get the senior pastor actively supporting it. Build that solid foundation way before the team even packs their bags.
Makes sense. Okay, so the team is prepared. They've fundraised, they arrive. And then comes culture shock, sometimes called entrance wounds.
Yeah, That's a term used. It captures that feeling of being hit by sensory overload, emotional overload. You're immersed in sights, sounds, smells, customs that are all new.
And that can lead to
Irritability, confusion, feeling overwhelmed, definitely homesickness. It's very real, especially if you haven't traveled much outside your own culture before.
So cultural training is just as important as language lessons.
Absolutely vital, the source argues, because we all carry these unconscious assumptions about how things should be.
Yeah.
Time, for example.
Ah, the classic one. Clock time versus event time.
Exactly. If you come from a culture where being 15 minutes late is a big deal, and you land somewhere where schedules are much more fluid, well, that can lead to frustration and misunderstanding pretty quickly if you're not aware.
Yeah, I see that. You need that heads up.
And there's another story about a regional healthcare worker in the Philippines. It really highlights needing sensitivity and including others, as the source puts it.
What happened there?
The mission team, with good intentions, kind of went around this local official, assuming they knew best, but it caused offense. The lesson was, check your sources, get the right permissions, respect the local structures already in place, don't just parachute in.
That seems like basic respect, but maybe easy to forget when you're focused on the task.
Perhaps. Then there's personal space. That's a big
Oh,
one.
yeah. What's the example?
The source mentions being in a crowded train station in India. People are physically very close, maybe even touching you while trying to help you with directions or luggage.
Which would feel really intrusive to many Westerners.
Totally. Our personal bubble is often much larger, so understanding that closeness isn't meant to be aggressive or weird, it's just normal there, requires a real mental adjustment.
You have to recalibrate your expectations about those unspoken rules. What about things like dress code? That comes up a lot, right?
It does. Especially with youth groups, the source notes. Shorts are often a common point of discussion. Or even things like sleeveless tops or dresses for women.
Seems minor, maybe.
Us, perhaps. But the point is, in some cultures, that kind of attire can be seen as disrespectful or immodest, especially in certain settings like churches or villages. It's not about whether we think it's okay. It's about how it's perceived locally.
So the principle is sensitivity, avoiding causing offense.
Exactly. The phrase used is avoiding the appearance of evil, essentially meaning be mindful of how your actions and appearance might be interpreted, even if your intentions are good. You want to maintain a positive witness.
And there was an example with Doug Nichols.
Yes, about propriety. He made it a practice, when working closely on projects with a female team member, to always have another male colleague present, just to ensure everything was above reproach, to avoid any potential misunderstandings or rumors.
That shows a high level of cultural awareness and concern for honorable conduct.
It does. And that connects to the bigger idea of working with a local church, not just alongside them or, worse, imposing on them.
The benefit to burden ratio you mentioned.
Right. Is the short-term team actually helping more than they're costing the local hosts in terms of time, resources, lodging, food, supervision? It needs to be a net positive.
And the source contrasted a couple of teams.
Yeah, there was a team from Michigan described as highly prepared, really meeting needs effectively. And then another team whose main contribution was apparently just performing a skit that wasn't even culturally appropriate.
Ouch. That highlights the difference good planning and cultural understanding makes. It's about service, not just showing up.
Precisely. And even seemingly simple logistics, like supplies. The anecdote about waiting for sand and cement that got delayed.
Right, a construction project grinds to a halt.
Exactly. You need contingency plans, good local contacts for sourcing materials. It all requires careful thought.
But it's not all about avoiding pitfalls. There was a positive example, too, the women's trip to Chile.
Yes, that was highlighted as a really positive experience. Their preparation was primarily focused on Bible study and prayer, fitting the nature of their trip.
So spiritual prep was key there.
Very much so. And the source pointed to strong spiritual leadership within the team, good organization, and again, that vital prayer support from back home. It sounds like it was a really impactful trip for everyone involved.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
And before we move on, we have to mention the language misstep, right? Amy and handsome.
Oh, right. Yes. Apparently, Amy was trying to compliment someone saying they were handsome, but her pronunciation in the local language came out sounding like bird droppings.
Oh, no.
Yeah, a classic, humorous example of how easily things can get lost in translation. It just underscores needing humility, maybe some better language coaching, and definitely a good sense of humor.
Definitely need the sense of humor. Okay, so we've covered a lot. The challenges, the cultural stuff, the planning. But the source also tackles that big question. Why go at all? Why not just send money?
That's a really important question, and the answer given focuses on the transformative impact that goes beyond just finances.
Impact on who?
On everyone involved, really.
Yeah.
On the team members themselves, it stretches them, changes their perspective. On the home church, it energizes them, connects them globally. On the recipient church, it offers encouragement, support, builds relationships. And even on the people back home who just prayed or gave money, they become part of the story.
So it's about connection, mutual growth, relationship building, things money alone can't buy.
That's the argument. Direct involvement fosters a different kind of understanding and partnership. And that experience at the North Korea border,
Yeah.
that's a fascinating example of unexpected impact.
What happened there?
The team was in a very controlled environment, obviously. But during a Q&A, someone on the team unexpectedly asked the North Korean guides what qualities they admired about their enemy, meaning South Korea or the U.S.
Wow, bold question. How did they react?
Apparently, it threw them off guard, made them think. It was a subtle way to challenge perspectives, even in that highly restricted setting.
That's powerful. And then the dinner.
Yes. The team hosted a dinner for some North Korean officials, and they made the decision to begin the meal by offering a prayer, specifically praying for the well-being of North Korea and its people.
In front of the officials.
Yes. It was described as a moment that transcended the political divisions, appealing to shared humanity, shared needs. A direct, quiet statement of care.
That's quite something. A real moment of connection against the odds.
It really demonstrates that even in the most challenging circumstances, there can be these surprising opportunities for genuine human exchange, for planting seeds,
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like the main takeaway is, well, the reality is complex, isn't it? It's so different from maybe what people imagine.
Absolutely. There's that gap between preparation and the unpredictable reality on the ground. There's the constant need for flexibility, cultural humility, resourcefulness.
And dealing with everything from lost luggage with ransom notes involving peanut butter sandwiches.
And navigating profound medical emergencies with limited tools, to understanding why wearing shorts might cause offense.
It's a lot. But also those moments of connection, the shifts in perspective, the beauty alongside the difficulty.
Definitely. It's a rich, challenging, and often deeply rewarding experience based on these accounts.
Which leads us to a final thought for you listening in. How might these ideas, preparing for the unknown, practicing cultural awareness, being adaptable, apply in your own life?
Yeah, think about it. Maybe it's starting a new job, moving to a new city or neighborhood, even just trying to understand someone with a very different background or viewpoint.
Could embracing that sense of the unexpected, really trying to understand before judging, could that lead to better connections, more meaningful outcomes in whatever situation you face?
It's definitely something to mull over. Prioritizing understanding over assumption. It seems like a principle that could apply almost anywhere.